Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. Can we get the slideshow going?
In a moment.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Today's topic is applying to prestigious scholarships. My name is Dr. Sophia Taineri. I am a research scholarships coordinator in the Undergraduate Research Hub, and I'm happy to have you all here to share some information about applying to prestigious scholarships. We actually have a nice lineup of different panel speakers today for you, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about what prestigious scholarships are so you have a little bit of an idea what that actually means. Next slide, please. So what are prestigious scholarships? You'll see some logos here of some well-known ones here on campus. We have more than this, but they are ones that are known regionally, nationally, or even internationally for students to apply to. They are very generous and large amounts of awards, large amounts that they award you. So maybe you might get 5,000, you might get 50,000, you might get 90,000, which is really nice. Sometimes they're multiple years, sometimes they're just 1 year, but they are very generous and helpful for students to apply to if they want to. And some of these students have been in your position not that long ago. So we wanted to encourage you all to learn about them just in case you were interested in applying. They are quite selective, and they have various levels that they might be focused on. A few of them might be focused on just as you're an undergraduate, you can apply. Some of them are more for post-baccalaureate students. So after you graduate with your bachelor's degree, you might be able to apply for them. They might even be very focused on graduate studies. So if you're going to graduate school at one of these universities, this might be something you want to consider applying to. So it's a very broad range of awards. Some of them are very specific to being domestic here in the United States. Others are international where you get to travel, or you may even possibly be an international student able to apply. And they are ones that you get lifelong recognition for if you do receive one of these different awards. So keep those in mind. You can find out more information at our website, prestigious.ucst.edu. And I'm happy to also speak with you all more if you're interested. More information will be shown at the end if you wanted to make appointments to talk more about them. Next slide, please. So these are our panelists today. We have, I hope, Dr. David Artis joining us, speaking about being a campus nominator or advisor for UC San Diego. He advises for multiple awards here on campus. We have Matthew Uzulak, who is award winner for 2023 Goldwater Scholarship. We have Daniel John, who's award winner for 2023 Strauss. And we'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute as well. Marigold Malinow, she is a 2023, or maybe 2022 actually, NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program award winner. Finally, we have Shin Ihara, who won a Schwarzman Scholars Program in 2022 as well. So welcome to our panelists. If we don't mind going down the row, maybe we can stop screen sharing and have each person introduce themselves, talk a little bit about which stage you're in, whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, a campus nominator, or something like that. And then maybe a 2 to 3 sentence description of the award that you won. Can we start with Marigold?
Yes. Hi, my name is Marigold. I am actually going up on my 3rd year of my PhD program now at Stanford University in Material Science and Engineering. I graduated from UCSD in 2021, so I won the NSF GRFP in 2021, actually. It's been a while, but that's okay. And the NSF GRFP is pretty much, it's targeted towards people looking into doing a research degree, whether that's master's or PhD. I think they do favor PhD a little bit though. And yeah, I think I covered everything.
Matthew?
Hello, everyone. As Sophia said, my name is Matthew, and I won the Barry Goldwater Scholarship. I'm starting my senior year, so I'm an undergrad. And and I'm studying neurobiology and biochemistry. And then, yeah, the Goldwater Scholarship, it's pretty amazing. I'm so happy to have been awarded it. It's essentially a 1-year scholarship, or in some cases 2 years, for sophomores. Essentially awarding, yeah, high prestige in natural science research. I think it's specifically natural sciences. So yeah.
All right, Shin.
Hi everyone. My name is Shin. I graduated from UCSD in 2021, majored in data science, and I attended Schwarzman Scholars Program from 2022 to recently. I graduated recently from Schwarzman, and I'm currently based in Hong Kong to work in finance. Schwarzman is a 1-year fully funded master's program focused on global affairs, leadership in China. It takes place in Tsinghua University in Beijing. And as I said, it's fully funded. And students come from across the world, 40% from the US, 30% from China, and 40% from the rest of the world.
And Daniel.
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, I think I glitched out. Yeah. Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a rising senior and I'm majoring in bioengineering biotechnology, and my minor is in poli-sci. So I was awarded the Strauss Scholarship, and basically the Strauss Scholarship is specifically for public service projects. Essentially, it's given to around 15 undergraduates in the state of California who are pursuing projects in public service. I think it's really cool because you don't necessarily need to be like a public policy major, like a poli-sci major, which is a lot of the scholarships in the space. A lot of people are kind of directly going into that field. I'm actually pre-med, and so my project really applies. As long as your project is incorporating aspects of like public service, you're able to they give you a lot of leeway to pursue a lot of different things. So yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. So this is actually a forum for all of you. If you have questions for any of these scholarship winners, please feel free to type in questions to the chat and I'll be happy to read them. You can also raise your hand and I can call on you to ask your question out loud too. I just noticed we have Dr. David Artis joining us as well. If you don't mind saying hello, Dr. Artis, can you tell us a little bit about your role as campus nominator and give us a brief description of maybe a couple of the awards that you oversee, like British Marshall or Beinecke Knight Hennessy? Oh. Hopefully Dr. Artis is still there.
Hi, Sophia. My internet is unstable, so I missed. I'm hoping you didn't just introduce me, but
no, I was asking if you can introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about maybe British Marshall, Beinecke, or Knight Hennessy, 2 to 3 sentences.
okay. There will be packed sentences. I hope you can hear me. As I said, my internet is going in and out. So hello, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces. So I am David Artis, Dean of Undergraduate Research Advancement, Director of the Undergraduate Research Hub, and campus representative for several of these prestigious scholarships. And I'm really happy to see a couple of folks I nominated for those, and they were successful nominees. So congrats again, since I last saw you. One of the things that I look for, perhaps the most important thing, is not the student's ability. It's not for me to say exactly how far the student's going to go professionally, academically. It's certainly important for me to have a sense of that, but the most important thing is to understand who is the best fit for a particular scholarship. So that may be why sometimes I will talk to a student who's really very, very accomplished, but I don't think that student is the best fit for, say, the Goldwater Scholarship, because it might have nothing to do with that student's ability, but Goldwater really prefers students who are looking for a research career. And this might be a student who wants to go to med school and get an MD and not do research. And so I have to respect what Goldwater says it wants. And that may be the same for something like the British Marshall or the Beinecke. So let me say a couple of things about those. And there was a third one, Sophia. You said British Marshall, Beinecke, and what was the third?
Knight Hennessy.
Knight Hennessy. So the British Marshall is, again, it's a scholarship that is a celebration of George Marshall, who helped rebuild Europe after World War II. It's got a stated goal of fostering better relations, or fostering relations between U.S. and the UK. So students who are interested in a post-bac year in Britain or 2 years, you can apply for a 1 or 2 year master's degree program. And you can apply at almost any university in the UK. This includes Oxford and Cambridge and the London School of Economics and University College London, but it includes some really great schools that students might not think about and that might not be as competitive, like the University of Nottingham, St. Andrews in Scotland, Queen Mary, University of London, all of which are really strong. And there are many more I don't know as much about. You would have to apply to more than one program, but if you are successful, you would be able to go to your British university for a 1 or 2 year master's program. It does have a 3.7 GPA requirement. It does ask for students to demonstrate a kind of leadership, and it does ask for what they call ambassadorial potential. And what they mean by that now, I think, is that they're really looking for people who are interested in fostering cross-cultural interactions. It used to be that this was a great scholarship for people who are interested in the foreign service, but it's a little less strict about that now. But if you were to apply for the Marshall, you would definitely want to show that you have been involved with these kinds of multicultural or cross-cultural activities. So that's one, and we can certainly talk in depth about it, but I think I've already gone over my 2 or 3 sentences. So Knight Hennessy is fully funded graduate study at Stanford in any field. It has a couple of things in common with the Schwartzman Scholarship in that there are 100 Knight Hennessy scholars accepted every year. They are international. They're from every field. They can be from any field. And they are also expected to have some interactions with each other, the scholars. So there is actually a home for the Knight Hennessy scholars at Stanford. It's called Deming House. And they do ask you regularly to have dinner with the other Knight Hennessy scholars so that you can really bounce your ideas off each other, advance some unconventional thinking. The Knight Hennessy, let me say, as opposed to the Marshall where you would apply, your Marshall application is also your application to graduate degree programs. Knight Hennessy, your Knight Hennessy application is separate from the graduate degree program you would be applying to at Stanford. So the Knight Hennessy application is due in October. The graduate degree application is likely due in December or January. So with Knight Hennessy, you would not get a notice saying you've been awarded the scholarship. You might get a notice saying you've been recommended for it, but you still have to be accepted into the degree program. If you are accepted into the degree program, you still don't necessarily have Knight Hennessy, then you would be invited to spend a weekend at Stanford with the other Knight Hennessy finalists. Once you're at that point, you stand a very good chance of being accepted. So be aware of Knight Hennessy. It is a 2-tiered application process. And the third one, the Beinecke, that was the third one, right, Sophia? So this is due winter quarter, and for students who are interested in graduate study in the arts and humanities, particularly, you would apply for this one actually the year before your final year as an undergrad, because if you receive the award, then you get a bonus payment in your final year of undergrad to help you with some of the costs associated with, getting ready for grad school, applying for grad school. It's $30,000, I believe. And for the Beinecke, because it really is an award where students who are interested in fine arts are encouraged to apply. One of the interesting things about it is that with your application, you can submit a sample of your work. So that might be a musical composition, it might be a film, it might be artwork. So you don't have to be looking for the fine arts, but if you are, you can actually demonstrate your proficiency. It's also for students who have a record of having received need-based financial aid. So in addition to the other application material, you would have to go to financial aid and have someone at that office verify that you have received need-based financial aid. And that you would have to do, since I am not allowed to see that information. So those are three. I am a nominator for a couple of other ones, including the Mitchell, which is for a postbac here in Ireland, and also for the Strauss, which is how I got to know Daniel, and the Goldwater, which is how I got to know Matthew. So if you have questions about any of those, please let me know.
All right, thanks, Dr. Artis. So with these, it sounds like there's just so many different scholarships out there, lots of different names being thrown around. It might be a little bit confusing, and I feel like with a lot of you, you may have considered applying to more than one. So I'm wondering, how did you prioritize and decide which ones were the ones that you would apply to during the year that you did so? Maybe we'll start with Marigold.
Yeah, so I think first it's what your goal is. A lot of these different scholarship fellowships are targeted towards different things. Like a lot of the panelists are in very different, receive very different scholarships than I have. But my big goal was funding for my PhD program. And there, even just under funding for a PhD program, there's a ton of different fellowships available. The NSF GRFP is probably one of the most popular ones that I see people apply to, because they have the most awardees, basically, because there's a ton of applicants and it still is pretty selective, but there's a lot of awardees. I also applied to Knight Hennessy, and there still are a lot of different fellowships that are available that people can apply to, but I found that just applying to two was within my bandwidth without getting overwhelmed that application season. So I think that was kind of how I narrowed that down.
Thanks. Daniel, I think I saw you nodding as well as we asked that question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you really have to evaluate kind of what your future goals are. And that's always a difficult process when you're still an undergraduate, doing your undergraduate degree. But for me, I'm in a very, I have a very research heavy resume. But with my goals in the future medical field, I really wanted to start getting involved with more community outreach projects that were related to medicine. And something that really stuck out to me about the Strauss, and this was something that Dr. Artis pointed out to me during the process, was that the Strauss Scholarship is very unique in that they're really committed to partnering with you as a student to get to further your project. And so for other scholarships, sometimes they're just giving you money to pursue your project directly with your research mentor. But for the Strauss Scholarship, the Strauss family is very involved, and they do check-ins, and you actually have to call them once a month or so, and they provide mentors that are in the field of your project that you're doing. And so this was I realized it was a great opportunity for me to get a lot of mentorship and advice into the project that I was undertaking. And so for me, I thought that was a very unique experience that I couldn't pass up on.
Nice. Shin or Matthew, do either of you have other things you wanted to throw in about your considerations? Go ahead.
Yeah, a few. I completely agree with both of them. I think your goals should be the first priority. I guess specifically for the Goldwater, it's research centered. So that was really appealing to me. I thought that it was in a way, sort of crediting all of the work and research that I've done up to this point. So that was, yeah, really appealing to me. But I think another thing that you should probably consider when you're applying for these scholarships is how qualified you might be or how competitive you might be as an applicant. And I don't want that to like scare anybody away. Like you definitely shouldn't be afraid from applying for these scholarships, but I do think that it can be sort of helpful to give you some guidelines if you consider yourself as an applicant. And yeah, at the end of the day, you really shouldn't be afraid. At the end of the day, all you're doing is applying, and nothing can really go wrong with that. So yeah.
Thanks for the encouragement, Matthew. Shin?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what's getting said so far. For Schwartzman, the focus is leadership in China, as I mentioned. So I think you really need to articulate, those two elements in the application as well. And I think for some applicants, it might be harder to, for example, answer the question, why China? Or like, what's your leadership? If those are not, necessarily your strong pillars. But I think Schwartzman actually welcomes, students with different degrees of experience and understanding of China, for example, or leadership too. So I think you just really need to know yourself, as well as like what you want to present to the admission board, so that you can, present a story that fits into one of those 150 scholars every year. You can actually check all the students' profile on Schwartzman website, and literally everyone has different backgrounds and different stories. Some students come from directly from undergrad, and some have full-time working experience, and also in terms of domain of interest, some come from finance or business, and others come from a more research-heavy background as well. So you just really need to know who you are, and again, why you really need that scholarship to achieve what you want to achieve in the future, and how leadership in China fit into that.
All right. So I know that applying to these scholarships usually takes a lot of time and preparation. I'm wondering about the process that you will utilize when you were applying. Did you use something like Excel or some other time management software to track your progress as you were applying to these various scholarships? Maybe we'll start with Matthew.
Yeah, I actually didn't use any program like Excel. And you're right, it is a very lengthy process. I would say that my tip to working through the scholarship applications would be to give yourself enough time for sure, but probably also to make sure you're really drafting multiple drafts of your application, because the first time around, it may not be up to the quality that you're capable of. You may need to go through multiple rounds of revision to really get an application that's really strong. I'm sure, yeah, some of these other people up here might have better strategies for sort of organizing the time frame. But I would say, yeah, multiple drafts is definitely key.
How about you, Shin? Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really use any apps either. I was pretty focused on only Schwartzman. And so for me, I applied to Schwartzman deadline is usually mid-September, I believe. And I graduated from UCSD in 2021, June of 2021, and I applied to Schwartzman a few months later. But when I was graduating, I already knew that I wanted to apply to Schwartzman. So I actually started preparing for the application like a few months before I graduated from UCSD, and I already had a full-time employment offer, and I knew that I was going to start working from the summer, and I knew that I won't be able to have much time for the application after I start working. So I just reminded myself to just start preparing early, and I mean I only had one application going on, so it wasn't really hard for me to track everything, I guess. But one advice would be just to start as early as possible.
Daniel, I saw you unmuted there.
Yeah, I definitely have a few pointers. So I think understanding like the long-term timeline is really important. So for example, if you want to apply for the Goldwater, you want to make sure, so you can apply as either a sophomore or junior, but you have to be aware of like, if you have more publications or like more research experience, you're obviously going to be more competitive as an applicant. So you might want to like wait till the next year so that you have like a project that you can showcase on your resume or like in your application. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And then also like Shin said, like the time that it's when the deadline is and how that affects kind of what you're doing during the school year. So for example, if it's like due around like a finals week, like the end of a quarter, or if you're like applying to med school and it's happening at the same time as like you're studying for the MCAT, that could be something that's difficult to navigate. But if you're aware of that well before you undertake the application process, you can like get it done before, and you can have a better application. And I think the most important thing though for me throughout the whole applications process is you really want to find someone who has gone through that specific application and was successful. And so what I've tried to do with a lot of these scholarships is pretty much all these scholarships showcase their scholars on their websites. And so thankfully, a lot of these scholarships, UCSD has been fortunate to have winners. So those are like more easier connections. Other ones are on their websites and you can usually find out their emails or like their LinkedIn profiles. So I would highly recommend finding them online, reaching out, and then just try to set up a call with them and get their advice. And if you're able to make a good connection with them, a lot of times they're also very willing to read your drafts. And I think that's a really important thing because there's a lot of things in your application that you might not realize, like kind of internal biases, and there's a lot of specific things that the applications committee is looking for that the successful scholars are able to know about that you might not have, that you might not necessarily be aware of as you're going through it. So all of those things have been really helpful for me personally.
Great. And Miracle?
Yeah, really good advice from everyone else, but I guess I didn't really use like any organizational like checklists or anything when applying to these, but I did start around 3 months before, which I found was at least a good time frame. I don't know when everyone else started on their applications, but I started about 3 months ahead of time, and I like let my letter of rec writers know like also very ahead of time that I was going to be applying to these things. And it just gives you a lot of time to like bounce back and forth with other people, like send them your application essays. They can take their time to read it and then get back to you. So yeah, let people know that you're applying ahead of time, and also start very early because you also might hit a roadblock or a writer's block, and it's good to have that time.
Great advice. Let's bring it back to Dr. Artis. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about the nomination process and how that works, like say for Beinecke or Mitchell, something that where you actually nominate the students versus another award.
Sure. So if I am nominating someone, what this means generally is that I'm also going to write a nominating statement. And a couple of these folks will tell you when I do that, I ask for as much information as possible. A nominating statement should include at least one paragraph where I talk about how I know the student. And it doesn't have to be, I've known the student for years and years, but I need to say I have talked to the student enough to know the student's aims and why I think the student is, as I said before, a good match for the program, and why I think the student can accomplish the student's aims. And then, if I have some good examples of the student's work, so if it's especially a research-based program such as Goldwater, chances are I will have read the required research essay. If it's a public service fellowship like Strauss, then I need to have read the proposal so that I can talk in depth about those things. And I really need to be able to show the people at the next level, because in some ways, I am the Goldwater program until I put the nomination forward. I'm the Marshall program until I put the nomination forward. So I think students, when they meet with me to talk about these, you have to understand that. You have to understand that's how I'm looking at this. You know, I am Marshall, I am Goldwater, I am Strauss, because they are trusting me to send them the students who are, as I said, you know, kind of the best fit for what they're looking for in their scholars. So what helps immensely is that I meet with the students, and sometimes, you know, over the 2 or 3 or 4 months that people have been talking about, it's a good thing if I can meet with applicants maybe 2, 3 times, maybe more. So I can get an idea of what the application looks like in its early stages, how it's growing into something that I think is competitive. And again, the more I can say about what the student has told me that the student wants to do, the more persuasive I can be in the nominating statement. So that's what I send them. Obviously, the other part of the nomination process is selecting however many applicants I can put forward from the number of applications that I receive. And so for Strauss, for instance, I can nominate 3 Strauss folks. Goldwater, I can nominate 4, unless one is a transfer student, then I can nominate 5. I think for Mitchell, I can nominate 1. And for Marshall, there isn't really a limit. So you should be aware of that too. For Beinecke, it's only 1. Yes. So yeah, again, as I said before, if for some reason I don't nominate anyone, it's not at all a judgment on that student's talent and abilities. It's just my best judgment about who is the best fit for this program. And again, when I'm thinking why this student versus that student, say for Mitchell, if I can nominate only 1 and I have a couple of strong applicants, it's going to come down to how well that student has told me why that student is the best fit for the Mitchell. And of course, things like GPA, academic performance, so that's certainly a part of it. But when all the applicants are strong in those areas, then you really have to think, is this someone who is in line with the goals of the program as I understand them? And that really does make a difference. Beinecke, is this someone who's really going to have a career in the arts, or an academic career that's based in the arts and humanities? If it's somebody for the Marshall, does this person demonstrate what they call that ambassadorial potential? It's hard for me to know that if students haven't talked to me about that, right? So for these some of these awards, we can certainly meet anytime, and for a couple of them, I've met with students at the last moment. It's just very hard for me to write a strong nomination statement if I've met them for only half an hour, if I haven't read anything, if I haven't read a resume, if I haven't read a research essay, or the narrative, the project narrative, say for Strauss. So yeah, so what I would say about the nomination process, if I'm nominating, then we should meet more than once throughout that process. And these are all long enough. Like the Goldwater application opens, I think, the 2nd Tuesday in September, and it closes the last Friday in January. So in all that time, we can meet. I've actually met with a couple of people already about it, and that gives us time to meet more than once, to talk about where the application is now, where it will be in 1 month, so that's very important. Just to say, the letters are also very important, and I obviously read all the letters for the scholarships for which I nominate people. So when someone says, make time to talk to your letter writers, be aware that that's another thing I'm going to take into consideration when I'm thinking about nominating someone. So make sure that your letter writers are thinking about why you are the best fit for this opportunity.
Thanks, Dr. Artis. As a follow-up, actually, I have a question in the chat that was sent to me. A student wanted to know more just about how they get nominated in the first place. And it sounds just more like, how are you even noticed to be nominated?
So again, if it's, there are some like Knight Hennessy where it's not absolutely necessary, or Schwartzman, for me to nominate the students. So the ones where I have to nominate the students, that you just have to understand the student can't go forward without my nominating someone. So if you are applying for Goldwater, you can't just apply to the Goldwater Foundation. It actually has to come from me. So how do you get nominated? You let me know that you're interested in this award. You can fill out all of the applications, but with Goldwater, the applications go to a dashboard, which is my dashboard. So yeah, it's possible to submit it without meeting with me, and then it shows up on my dashboard and I'll read it. I won't have as much information. So, if I decide to nominate someone and I haven't met with that student, I just feel like my nominating statement won't be as strong because I won't have that push from me saying, I know the student. I know the student well enough to say, this is someone who has high but reasonable goals and can attain them. So so if it's a Marshall, a Goldwater, a Strauss, a Beinecke, a Mitchell, you cannot apply directly. You have to meet with me, or the Churchill, right? You have to meet with me to be nominated. So that's how you get nominated. If it's one of those, make an appointment to meet with me, and then we'll talk about it.
And we'll have more information at the end about how to reach out to some of us. So,
and can I just say one thing? Yeah, it's really terrific if they meet with you first to talk about this. When I say you have to meet with me, let me just say it's not really intimidating. It's really a good time for me to get to know people, to talk, and maybe just mind telling you, oh, this might be really great for you, and yeah, don't be nervous about it. If you meet with me, chances are I'll be in a good mood. I'm always happy to meet students who are interested in these awards. So I don't want that to come across as this big intimidating thing.
And actually, since we're talking a little bit about that, I want to hear from the winners a little bit about your experiences when you've had to work with a campus nominator like Dr. Artis. What was that like? Daniel, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, sure. And I think this circles back to the question you asked before about how kind of deciding like which scholarship is right for you. I know that you and Dr. Artis know this. I have like a lot of different potential paths I could take. And so I think at all the meetings that I've ever had with Dr. Stein Artis, they just did a really good job of helping me understand what the criteria were for the different scholarships, kind of how I would be the strongest to apply to those. And so therefore coming to like a really good conclusion as to what my best option was while keeping my my future career plans in mind. And so as I mentioned for the Strauss scholarship, the aspect of being able to continue this project after my time with the Strauss program was really appealing. And so that was kind of an emphasis that I wasn't aware of just through reading on the website. And so I remember Dr. Artis telling me that Todd Gloria, who's the current mayor of San Diego, was actually a former Strauss scholar. And so he's still very involved with his Strauss project, even to this day, even though he's really busy, obviously, as the mayor of San Diego. And so that was something that I thought was really cool. And so I think there's little things that you'll glean from your meetings with Dr. Stein and Dr. Artis, because they've able to successfully nominate and help all of these students in the past years get these scholarships that will be really helpful in navigating which ones to choose and how to best prepare for it.
All right, Shin, how about you? Did you meet Dr. Artis? How was that?
So I don't think I needed a nomination, and I don't think I met Dr. Artis until my interview prep, I remember. But yeah, I worked with you, Sophia, on my application from the earlier points of the application timeframe, I remember, but not necessarily for nomination.
Can you actually tell us a little bit about when you worked with Dr. Artis for the interview prep?
So yeah, interview prep was kind of a challenge for me because so first interview is pretty simple. It is 30 minutes interview, but you need to sit down with a panel of 6 interviewers, and they all come from different disciplines, but they're very successful in whatever they do. The head of my panel was actually Kevin Rudd, who is former Prime Minister of Australia, who is well known in his understanding of China. And so, yeah, I knew that interview was going to be challenging and tricky for me, especially given that I hadn't gone through something like that in the past. So I, asked Sophia to help me on it, and she arranged a mock interview with her and Dr. Artis. And I remember we just went through my application for like an hour, and you two asked me a really good questions that were really similar to that came up in the actual interview.
Great, thanks. Marigold, how was your experience?
The scholarship I have, NSF-JRFP isn't a nomination process, but I did communicate with Sophia and Dr. Artis for Knight Hennessy, which I did not receive, but they were both very helpful in like letting me understand actually what the fellowship actually like entailed, what they're looking for in an applicant, and they both did provide me with like guidance on how to like identify like traits in myself, or like that would be tailored to the like the goals of that scholarship sort of thing. So yeah, I don't have like extensive experience with nomination, but any fellowship or scholarship, they're very helpful in helping you identify like what's useful.
Matthew?
Yeah, I actually completely agree with Dr. Artis when he says that meeting with him is not intimidating. It was a very pleasant experience. I think I sent him my research proposal for the Goldwater Scholarship maybe like a day or two before, and asked him to look over it. And then in the meeting, we just discussed all the critiques and suggestions that he had for the proposal. So it was really helpful, the whole process. I'm really happy that I did meet with him. And then, yeah, I also met with Sophia, I believe maybe once around that same time, just to discuss my resume, my CV. So I think that was really helpful too. And yeah, again, not at all intimidating, very, very nice.
Great, thanks. So we touched a little bit on letters of rec. I think Dr. Artis mentioned this earlier. It's a key component of a lot of these scholarships. And I think for a lot of people, or for a lot of these awards, it's at least 2 required, maybe 3, 4, 5. Tell us a little bit about how you selected, who would write them, how you approached those people to be part of your team in applying for this scholarship. Shin, maybe?
Yeah, so in my case, short-term requires 3 letters of recommendations. And as I said, your application needs to be focused on your leadership abilities as well as your interest and experience with China. And I wanted to bring those up in my recommendation letters as well. So I had 3, recommenders. 2 of them talked about my leadership experience, and also 2 of them talked about my interest in China. And I worked with them pretty closely to make sure they cover those elements, and the stories are coherent with my main essays. And one of them was UCSD professor who I worked with on research, and one of them was a professor from Peking University in Beijing, where I did my undergraduate exchange. And the last person was my previous manager from internship. So they all brought different perspectives of my story, and I think it works pretty well in terms of just integrating different elements. And I guess what the point of letter of recommendation is to kind of support whatever points that you think is important in application, but where you might not necessarily have strong evidence in your resume, for example. Like, let's say your application is like focused on startups, which was my case, but you don't necessarily have a lot of experience with startups. But your recommenders can talk about your interest in or understanding of startups, and which can help you to, I guess, present as a strong candidate in those field that you're interested in. So make sure to use those letters of recommendation as a kind of smart way to, I guess, highlight whatever you want to highlight in your application, and make sure to closely work with them so that your story is coherent, as they said.
How about you, Daniel?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things that you also want to be aware of if you're thinking about this process right now is like who your letter writers would be as you're taking classes, and how you can really foster relationships with these professors so that when the time comes, you're able to get a letter of rec from them. And that's really important because some of these scholarships might require like professors in different professions. So somebody who, like if you're applying for more of a research heavy scholarship, obviously you'd want your PI to support you, maybe a professor who's taught one of your STEM classes, but then some of them might also ask for maybe like a humanities professor. And so for me specifically as a bioengineering major, that was kind of a challenge at certain points because it just wasn't as easy to take classes and to meet these professors that could write that humanities letter of rec for me. Thankfully, the organization that I TA'd for has more of a humanitarian focus, so that really helped. And so I would just be aware of, I would try to look at this kind of advance, maybe even like a year in advance, and look at it with like your 4-year plan and like who your professors could be for these different letters of rec. And yeah, that would be that. I think that would be the advice that I would give.
Matthew?
Yeah, so I actually think that my selection of writers was a bit easier, just because the Goldwater is actually research-based. So I was clearly, as Daniel said, I'm going to select my PI, ask him to write a letter. But then also the other research faculty at UC San Diego that we've collaborated with. So on our publications and in some of our other work, I worked with other research faculty other than my PI. And yeah, I reached out to them. They were more than willing to write a letter to speak to my work in research. I think the key takeaway is just you need to make sure that you're giving them enough time when you do ask them, because one, it's considerate to them, but also the more time that they have, the more time that they'll probably put into that letter, and it'll end up being a better letter in the end. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Marigold?
Yeah, so my letters of rec were also pretty straightforward because for NSF-GRP, it is research-based. So I did ask my PI and then also a professor from a summer research experience. So it's definitely good to think about like what the goals are of the scholarship. Like, is it research-based? Is it like humanitarian-based? And also communicate that to whoever's writing your letter of recommendation, because you can't just assume that they know already, even though that they might. So make sure to communicate to them like that, oh, this is something research heavy, like maybe bring up examples of my research experience, or if this is something like heavy on like humanitarian efforts, and maybe we can talk about me more as a person, sort of thing. So make sure to communicate those goals to them.
Thank you. I got a question from the chat. The student is asking, is it too late for me to apply to scholarships as a rising senior? Anyone want to take that? I see a no. And I think that's Daniel's answer, not that he doesn't want to take it, but it's not too late. Do you want to say more, Daniel?
Yeah, and I think Dr. Artis would probably be better to answer this question, but it's definitely not too late. I know that obviously a lot of these scholarships were like junior year, but I'm actually like in the process of looking at like the Fulbright and the Marshall. Those are two specific scholarships that you apply going into your senior year. So if you're interested, check them out because it's not too late.
Nice.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
let me say that many of the scholarships will have an age limit, but not a class limit. So you can apply, say, for the Rhodes until I think you're 26. For the Marshall, there is no age limit. So what you would want to do when you see one that you're interested in, take a look, because generally speaking, it will say you have to have a bachelor's. You can't have started a PhD program, but many of them will accept students who have a master's degree or who've graduated and worked for a year or two. As Shen said, that there are a number of folks who apply for Schwartzman who've had professional experience, and it's the same with Knight Hennessy. So you actually can graduate, work for a year, or do something interesting, and then feel that you've gathered some more experience or had some more interesting non-academic experiences, and you can still apply. So as I said, take a look at the individual scholarships, and you'll see you can apply for a Rhodes after you've worked for 2 or 3 years, and really then you can say that with that professional experience, you're really sure about your path now. So I think it's great if you apply right out of college, but if you want to take some time and really get some hands-on experience, that would be good. Obviously, Goldwater, Strauss, those are ones you would apply for because they are for use when you are an undergraduate. But the post-baccalaureate ones, many of them will be ones that you can apply to as long as you're under the age limit.
And we have a couple of questions regarding the age limit since this came up. Why is there an age limit, and do they all have late age limits? Maybe you can follow up, Dr. Artis.
So they don't all have age limits. The British Marshall American director pointed to me and said, "You could apply." And I said, "No, I have a PhD, but thanks for telling me I'm not too old to do this." Some have an age limit because they are interested in having the idea of scholars at the beginning of their career. So again, I think there is an age limit for Knight Hennessy and Schwartzman, but you can apply definitely after you've graduated, as you've heard. Most of the scholarships we've talked about are funded by individual organizations. So they will set their own rules. They'll have their own criteria, their own goals. So if it's funded by a foundation, the foundation gets to say what they're looking for. And they might be looking for people between the ages of 18 and 30 who are interested in having an impact on a certain part of the world. They might be interested in people at any age who are looking for the ability to broaden their perspective on their profession. If you look at something like the Fulbright Scholarship Program, there are different levels of Fulbright scholars. So you can apply, undergraduates coming out of your college career can apply for a Fulbright student, but there's also a mid-career Fulbright. So people well along into their careers can apply for that and really have something that adds to the perspective they have on their job. So it's again, very much something that's tied to each program. So you want to investigate that. The one thing that is fairly constant is that they don't really expect people who have a PhD or even who've started a PhD program to look for this. I think the idea is not to interrupt someone who is in the midst of getting a doctorate. And if you have a doctorate, I think they feel that you probably have the kind of training where you can really pursue your career now. Whereas if you're looking for a master's, you might be still developing the kind of skill set that you'll bring to a doctoral program.
Thanks, Dr. Artis. Actually, one of the questions, this isn't something we've quite touched on, but one of the questions we got when people were registering, quite a few different students asked if international students can apply. And I'm thinking if we can start with Shin to talk a little bit more about Schwartzman.
Right. So as I said at the beginning, Schwartzman is actually 60% international students. So 40% is from the US, but 20% is from China, and the other 40% are from the rest of the world. And I'm one of them. I originally come from Japan. And yeah, so Schwartzman is totally open to international students. And I think within that 40% of other international students, I don't think there's like a specific breakdown or like specific quotas that each country's got. But I think if you go to the website, you can see that every year we accept like students from, like for example, my cohort had only one Japanese student, but every year we had like a few Japanese students, and you can kind of see the trend that every year we try to make sure we have students from all over the world, different areas of the world, and even within, for example, Asia Pacific, we have students from all over Asia. So as for Schwartzman, it's totally open to international students, and I think, especially in my play to advantage, as you can talk about, for example, in my case, I can talk about Japan-China relationship, but specifically, which for example, students from the US cannot really speak to. So being international students, I think in many cases can work well for Schwartzman at least.
Great. I don't know if you were aware of this with Knight Hennessy Marigold. Do you have any information about that?
Knight Hennessy, I'm pretty sure that international students can apply to Knight Hennessy. I would double check that, but there's a lot of the research fellowships, unfortunately, are restricted to like US citizens or residents. But there are a few, which I'm not sure about because I'm not international, that are open to international students. I have heard that they can be quite a bit competitive. Knight Hennessy is also very competitive. So yeah, that's the information I have on international. But.
No worries, thanks. Dr. Artis, other things you want to add in?
So first, Knight Hennessy will accept international students. The Fulbright is sponsored, I believe, by the State Department. So you have to be an American citizen or permanent resident. And that is true for a number of the fellowship programs, because, as I said, they have different foundations behind them, or different sources of sponsorship. We have been talking about a few scholarships. There are many of them, and so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some we haven't talked about today, and maybe some we don't even know about that are open to international students. But Knight Hennessy and Schwartzman definitely are. One that is kind of in an interesting edge space is the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans, which is restricted to students who are applicants who are either first-generation Americans or children of first-generation Americans. So even though it's restricted to citizens or permanent residents, it's still, because of its requirement that people be no more than a first-generation American, it still has that kind of international focus. And the winners of that fellowship can be from any ethnic group. So we've had some very interesting Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship winners who've gone on to be part of these very interesting groups. So I would say there are some, and we don't know them all, but we don't know all of them anyway. So I would certainly take a look, but Knight Hennessy and Schwartzman, yes. Fulbright, no. I think the Marshall, as I said, it's because it fosters British-American friendship understanding, so that you have to be an American citizen or permanent resident. Goldwater, citizen or permanent resident. But take a look if something interests you. I wouldn't pretend to know all of the ones that are out there.
And actually, I'm just remembering, I believe the Strauss is open to students who are international students as well. There is no restriction.
Right.
Do you want to say anything about that, Daniel?
Yeah, I just checked the website too. I don't believe there are any restrictions on that. So you should be good.
Yeah, I recall them talking about that in the past. Did you have something, Dr. Artis?
Well, I would just say one of the good things about the Strauss too is that it's really about the project. So speaking of international, you can use Strauss funding to do a project anywhere in the world. One of our recent winners had a project in Armenia. We've had winners do projects in Sierra Leone and Mexico. I think Vietnam, or at least we had a strong applicant who wanted to do the work in Vietnam. So yeah, it can be a very good way if you want to do some project anywhere in the world, if you can persuade the Strauss folks of the merit of your project.
And I think, Daniel, are you in Fiji?
Yeah, my project is going to be in Fiji as well.
Great, yeah. But there is no requirement for the project to be international. I think some students do very local projects if you're interested in public service. Yeah. But yes.
Fiji or Chula Vista, we've had projects there too. Yeah.
The whole range, right. Great. So I do know that it's a little bit past 5 and there was some miscommunication. Some people may have been notified this ended at 5, others have been notified it ends at 5:30. If you have to go, of course, please feel free. But I think that for a little bit, we'll keep on going with some questions, especially if people still want to stick around to ask questions. But let me go on to another quick question. With the applicants that have won some of these awards, can you tell us about an experience when you've applied and did not receive the award? Maybe we'll start with Marigold.
Yes, so I applied during my application cycle, I applied to NSFJRFP, which I received, and Knight Hennessy, which I did not receive. I don't think it's anything like bad to not receive the awards. These scholarships are very, very competitive, and sometimes their awarding process is a bit of an enigma. You can be really strong and still not receive it. But I do think that you learn quite a bit still about like yourself and get to kind of think about yourself a lot when you're applying to these scholarships. You can learn kind of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how that is translating to the application process. I also think there's a lot of, when you're applying to these things and you're talking to a lot of people, you can foster a lot of connections. So it's definitely not bad to apply and not receive something. You can still like learn and grow a lot when you are applying to these scholarships. Yeah, because I felt like I learned a lot about myself during this application process, whether I was awarded the scholarship or not.
How about you, Daniel?
Yeah, so I think I tried to apply to the Goldwater my sophomore year, and I wasn't successful in that. And that was partly because I was, for a variety of reasons, I was on a very tight timeline. So I think I was trying to like get a paper published like right before my Goldwater application so that I could showcase it. But it was just too tight of a timeline. And I think also with letter writers, it was difficult at that point in time with the professors that I knew. But yeah, I ended up winning the Strauss a year later. And so definitely learned a lot of lessons from that in terms of preparation. And yeah, so the biggest lesson I learned was definitely making sure that you set apart enough time for it, because these scholarships are so comprehensive. So you definitely want to try to give yourself at least 3 to 6 months, if not more.
Matthew?
Yeah, I had a few comments. So basically, I just wanted to say that whether you are selected for the scholarship or not, whether you win it or you don't win it, either way, applying for it and the whole process of applying for it will be good practice I think many of the questions, or I guess in some cases you have to do an interview for the scholarship. The whole process seems like it could be very valuable, just as life skills. I think it could be very useful. And even going through all of the motions to apply for the scholarship, that will just mean that your future applications and any future scholarships or jobs that you may apply to, it'll be that much stronger. So yeah, don't let it discourage you if you aren't selected.
How about you, Shin?
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo what Matthew just said. You know, my case was also I was only focused on Schwarzman. I was fortunate enough to receive the scholarship, but my application process was totally challenging, but also really helped me to articulate what I want to do in my career and stuff like that. So it was not the most recent experience, but really insightful at the end. And also for Schwarzman, I know a lot of my classmates actually applied for the scholarship multiple times. So I think that's one of the things you can totally do, and I think that's also applicable for many other scholarships, I believe.
All right. I'm curious. I know Daniel kind of mentioned a couple of the other scholarships he's considering applying for now. Are others of you thinking about new scholarships that you're looking forward to applying to? Maybe Matthew?
I think Dr. Artis mentioned it earlier, the Churchill Scholarship. I'm not sure if I will. It was a pretty brief thought of mine, but I definitely will look into it more.
Sounds good. Marigold, Shin?
I guess I'm getting kind of more into my mid-late graduate career. I will probably be applying for fellowships as my funding runs out from NSF/GRP, but I feel that it's not relevant right now to the undergraduate population. But yes, the application process and going through things doesn't stop even when you're in graduate school.
Are you thinking about some dissertation fellowships or ones that are mid-PhD?
There's a few fellowships internal to Stanford that I'm thinking of applying to. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Shin?
I'm not considering at the moment, but I was interested in Knight Hennessy for either my MBA or PhD in the future, possibly, because a few of my friends from Schwarzman actually received Knight Hennessy, and I think they are attending Stanford for that. And I think for Schwarzman, there's actually a lot of people who, for example, take a year of absence from whatever their graduate programs. For example, I had a few friends who took a year absence from their medical school before their last year in the medical schools. And there are other folks who have finished their law school or they're in the middle of law school education. So Schwarzman is really flexible to kind of combine with other graduate programs or other scholarships as well.
Great. And Daniel, can you remind us what were the scholarships that you were thinking about?
Yeah, I'm looking at a few right now. The main ones are definitely the Fulbright and the Marshall, and those deadlines are coming up. And definitely long term, I would be interested in the Knight Hennessy as well. But yeah, I would just encourage you to apply to as many of them as possible. Obviously within reason, because they're very time consuming. But I think you will find that, as Matthew said, even just going through the process is very helpful, and you learn so much. And you can, for a lot of these scholarships, you can kind of use those essays again. And so each time you do another scholarship and you succeed at it, or even if you don't make it to that round, you learn so much. And so I remember when I first got like my first Charles scholarship and the URS scholarship, each of those steps, and then now the Strauss, each of those applications definitely prepared me for the next one.
Nice. Okay, we have a question from the chat. If we're an incoming transfer student with limited experience, is it still feasible to apply for junior level scholarships, or do we have a better chance applying next year for senior level ones? Maybe Dr. Artis?
Well, I'd have to say I'm not entirely sure what what the question means by junior level scholarships. So this person, depending on the major, could apply for the Goldwater, could possibly, again, depending on the major, apply for Beinecke. The other ones would be likely post-bac. I'm not aware of any senior level scholarships. So but I think the best thing that person could do would be to talk to you, Sophia, and get an idea of the lay of the land. There's certainly nothing, there's no bias against transfer students. As I said, for Goldwater, I can nominate 4 students, but if one of them is a transfer student, then I can nominate 5. And I think that there are a number of foundations and groups that are looking to make sure that the people who are nominated and representing them as their scholars really represent a wide range of American educational opportunities. And I think transfer students are, can be just as strong as any other candidate if they've shown these qualities, not only the academic excellence, but initiative, resilience, determination, creativity, all the kinds of things that come out in the application one way or another.
Thank you. And sure, yeah, if people want to talk more with me to kind of figure out more of those first steps, you're more than welcome to. Let me give one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up with a couple last slides. So just for each of the panelists, looking back, knowing what you know now, do you have any particular advice, like one tip that you might give to maybe a younger version of yourself, or to the students here, maybe considering applying to the award that you won? Maybe we'll start with Daniel.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to dream big. I think before my freshman year, is like the summer before my freshman year, and there was a prestigious scholarships webinar that Sophie and Dr. Sai put on, and they had like all the different advisors for like the different scholarships, and I remember them talking about their recent winners and like how many papers they published to get that particular scholarship, or the projects they undertook, and it seemed very intimidating, but just being able to dream big and understanding that definitely can be you in a couple of years, if not sooner. And I think the most important thing is how you really plan out your steps ahead of time. So just being very aware of it, and it's really never too soon to start planning for these things. So yeah.
Thanks. Shin, any advice?
Yeah, so my advice would be to just focus on yourself. So as I said, Schwartzman has 2 focuses on leadership and on China. And I think every applicant has very different stories around those 2 things. And as I mentioned, if you go to Schwartzman website, you can read all the scholars' profiles, and which are definitely helpful in crafting your application. But I think I maybe compared too much between myself and those admitted scholars back then, and I think I should have focused more on my own story, because everyone has a different take on leadership, and everyone certainly does have different interesting experience with China. Just for reference, Schwartzman actually admit students with varying degrees of interest and understanding of China. Some students have previously studied in China, as I did, but others come with almost no China background, but they certainly do have strong interest in China. So yeah, my advice is just to focus on yourself. Just make sure you can articulate what you want to do and how you want to use that scholarship and opportunities to achieve what you want to achieve in your career. And I guess finally, just to start early to prepare, because it definitely takes time. And yeah, good luck.
All right, Marigold?
Yeah, I think one thing is just be very honest, like with yourself and in the application process. I feel like I hear a lot of students when they're thinking about applying to things, they're saying like, oh, what do I do to look good? Like, what do I say to look good on the application? But I think once you start thinking about just what you want to write to look good, then it's not you anymore. And I feel like that becomes very apparent. So be very like honest with your intentions, with your goals, and like you as a person, because I think that's what makes you the most unique and makes you like shine the most on these sort of applications. So be very honest and don't do anything just because it looks good, or don't put anything down just because it looks good.
Okay, and Matthew?
Yeah, I think it may have been said a bit earlier, but I really think it is important that you just give yourself enough time to apply for these scholarships. I think for my scholarship, I was applying pretty last minute, and especially if you're trying to meet with Dr. Artis or the application is pretty lengthy, you're really going to want to have enough time to make sure that the quality is as great as it can be. So yeah, you really just want to make sure that you have enough time for the whole process. That would be my tip.
Thank you. Dr. Artis, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, two things. And one, a number of people have said something like this. I think it's really worth repeating and saying again. Be authentic. Some folks have said, be honest, be yourself. Be authentic, and realize that if someone is reading hundreds of applications, trying to read them quickly, what will stick out is somebody who really isn't like everybody else. And again, they will get to the markers of your academic ability and your research experience somewhere else in the application. But what will make you stand out is saying something other people have not said, putting forth an idea other people have not given them. So be authentic. Don't be afraid to put your experience, your life experience, your real goals in there. So that's one thing. And I would say too, it's not a bad thing to go through this with friends. This does not have to be competitive. So if you know people who are applying for these kinds of fellowships, and you're applying, support each other. Just check in, ask them how it's going. Ask them if they would read something that you've written. Ask them which ones they're applying to and why. So we have a lot of really talented students here, and I think that sometimes people feel like they have to really kind of focus and do the things by themselves. But some of the most successful applicants are the people who shared this project not only with their mentors but with their lab mates, sometimes with friends and classes. So just be aware you don't have to take the idea that this is something you have to do all on your own. You can actually have a little support team, and I think that that's a very good thing. Even after you've submitted the application, it's very nice to have people around when you're waiting for the decision. So use community as well.
And actually, I did get another question. The person wants to know if students can, or the winners can talk about the research projects that they did while they were undergraduates. Shin, were you doing research as an undergrad?
I didn't have my own research, but I worked as a research assistant in the one of the labs in GPS, focused on China's electricity market.
Nice. Matthew?
Yeah, I work in an oncology-based lab, and specifically it's really microbiology-based. So we look into the microbiome, the human microbiome, and how the bacterial and fungal and even sometimes archaeal viruses, how those species can sort of correlate or potentially cause cancer development in patients.
Marigold?
Yes, so in my undergrad, I was working in a lab in the nanoengineering department for use of soft materials to interface with for haptic interfaces, so sense of touch. And then I was in that lab for pretty much all 4 years of my undergraduate. And then I also did a summer at Stanford virtually, COVID, but I did also do a summer at Stanford where I did work for materials to like build on the moon and Mars and stuff. So those are my two undergrad research experiences.
And finally, Daniel.
Yeah, my path to the Strauss was a little bit unconventional. So I'm actually in the same research lab as Matthew. And so a lot of our research had been very basic science oriented. But kind of during COVID, we did a lot more clinical research. So working with electronic medical records databases and specifically talking to a few of our collaborators, I realized that was a big passion of mine. And so I was actually able to write a paper with one of the big EMR experts at UC San Diego Health. And that made me realize, along with the program that I TA with at UCSD, which is called Global Ties, I realized that I wanted to do something that really merged my passions for medical and biomedical research with outreach and improving healthcare in the developing world. And so the Strauss provided a great opportunity to do that. Yeah, so those are kind of things that contributed to it for me.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody. So we do have a couple of slides I just wanted to go over real quick. Marie, if we don't mind sharing. Since a lot of these we've talked about various scholarships, we wanted to tell you about a number of different upcoming deadlines. And so please take a look at this, grab a screenshot if you can. The ones that have a little bit of a gold coloring in the font, that are for students that are open to international students to apply. And please note also that all of these do have certain deadlines that are listed here, but there may be earlier internal deadlines if you do need to be nominated. So usually that's 2 to 4 weeks ahead of time. You'll want to check with the campus nominator, or you may check with me to find out more. We do have those listed on the prestigious scholarships website usually. But if you're not sure, feel free to reach out. So this is just a couple of the different awards that we talked about today, and a few that we haven't really mentioned too much, but keeping in mind. And then next slide, please. For more information, please visit our website, prestigious.ucsd.edu. Dr. Artis's information is here. If you'd like to make an appointment with him, please reach out to Mercedes Favors. Her email is listed here as well. Andra Jacques does do a number of study abroad type scholarships, including Fulbright, if you're interested. Dr. Ross Frank does do the Rose, which is the most famous one perhaps of a lot of these scholarships. So you may want to reach out to him for that and other scholarships. NSF Felicity Dominguez Howell might be able to give you some guidance on that. And just general advising, you're welcome to reach out to me, Dr. Sophia Taineri. I do have a Calendly link, not on this page, but if you want to check out my information on the URH website, you can also make appointments that way. Instead of directly through email, you can just calendar it and it will be booked automatically on my calendar. But thank you so much to all the different speakers for being here today. Thank you to you all who are still here listening in. But we're glad to have at least shared some information with you, and we hope that you will consider applying to some of these scholarships, and take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.